everyone. My name is Rufus Thibodeaux, and welcome to another episode of Promise and Purpose, where we talk about the transformative power of God's Word and how that links to us discovering our purpose and unlocking our untapped potential. Today, I'm here with Simon Trautmann, one of the top attorneys in the Twin Cities. And
Hello, hello.
we're gonna just keep the conversation going about how aligning yourself with the promises of God, just the link between aligning yourself with the promises of God and the potential that lies on the inside of you and how to tap into that. So Simon, let's get into it, man. Uh,
Hello.
yeah, I know things are crazy, busy and everything, but I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. So why don't you just start by
Thank you.
maybe
Thank you
just
so much. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I just really enjoy your energy and the opportunity to just share and spend time with you. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, I know I kind of did a quick intro, but kind of a little bit about your background, what you do, what brought you to the law, maybe a little bit, and just, a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Well, thank you, and thanks again for the invitation.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, I'm an attorney for the last decade. I've been a local politician and serving my city as a council member. Married for 22, going to be 23 years with two boys, incredible young adults, and also I'm the son of a Puerto Rican
Mm.
entrepreneur and small business owner here in the Midwest, here in Minnesota. And so when I began to practice law, and as I built my practice, we focused and built our practice. We serve everybody, but we primarily focus on representing Black, Latino, and first generation entrepreneurs, small business owners, and nonprofit organizations. And so working with leaders and folks that bet on themselves,
Mm.
like my mother did
Yeah.
when I was a child. And for anybody that's grown up in the family business and the small business, like you know that experience.
Yeah.
And I just resonate with that so much. And so that's the practice side. But
Okay.
then as a leader of my own small business and of our own firm, we say we're committed to the radical proposition that legal professionals can be happy and can be healthy.
Okay.
And in the industry, it is in fact a radical proposition, and that's
Wow.
rooted in my faith identity, that's rooted in my values. And practicing law is an opportunity to express those values.
Nice, nice. I like that. So as you know, as we've talked about, the podcast, the focus is really talking about our challenges, our struggles, the things that we've kind of overcome, and sort of the lessons that we've learned along the way. So that said, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey, and so we'll get right into and I'm just letting you know, give you fair warning, I'm bringing the heat with these
All right.
questions. Okay, so
Okay.
are you
All right.
ready? All right.
I'm ready. Lawyers, it's tough for lawyers to engage in self-disclosure, but that's what we signed up for.
All
So
right.
so
I
let's
love
let's
it.
jump let's jump in.
I love it. So, all right. So, how have you personally dealt with feelings of unfulfillment and maybe disconnection from your potential? And then, what strategies have you found helpful in overcoming those kinds of issues?
Mm. That word disconnection is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's like a word like in our world that's hyper connected and connected with everybody's connected everywhere all the
Yeah. Yeah.
time. And
Sure.
what do we have? We experience a crisis of loneliness, a crisis of depression, a crisis of substance abuse, and what's the word for technology abuse, for
Oh, I don't
phone
know.
phone addiction, like these kinds of things. These are
Yeah.
not expressions of deep connection, they're expressions of deep disconnection.
Sure.
And I think one example of disconnection would be, maybe the founding of my firm, and that came
Mm.
out of deep pain,
Okay.
deep disconnection. It was about 11 years ago, and I, had built a successful law practice, and then had taken that law practice to a larger firm.
Mm.
And I had never been more miserable in my life, never felt
Wow.
more disconnected
Wow.
than when I was in that environment where, even though I don't have anything bad to say about the larger law firm. The partners were ethical, honorable people. At the end of the year, they said, "Trautmann, we like you. We just need more billable hours from you. We want you.
Okay.
We want all of you." And I had a second child on the way, and had just come through a year where I had probably never felt more depressed,
Mm.
more disconnected from my work and who I was and myself. And at the same time, um, I was reflecting on what it would take to be a partner at a law firm
Mm.
like that. My older cousin Jesse Trautmann was a lawyer, somebody that I looked up to,
Mm.
and he took his life.
Wow.
And that is maybe the ultimate expression of disconnection.
Sure.
And I just realized life is too short to be miserable for me in the practice of law. But for everybody out there, it's life is too short to just endure in misery just because you're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so how did I deal with that? One, I had to have an honest conversation with myself. I had to have an honest conversation with my wife, who
Mm.
even then was my wife of more than a decade.
Okay.
Um, and so sometimes when you feel like something's not right, it takes some courage and some honesty, especially in the Midwest here, where we just
Yeah.
kind of,
Right.
that's not, you're supposed to be tough. You express that by not showing emotion. And as in particular as a lawyer, I tell folks, when you think about what your lawyer does and why lawyers have such high incidence of mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges, we're right up there with actually pastors and police officers, which is an
Wow.
interesting cohort of people who
Yeah. Yeah.
suffer with similar problems. But people come to lawyers a lot of times when they're dealing with some of the most painful things in their life. And unlike a pastor maybe who's like, well, I'm here to listen, I'm here to help, or a therapist, like, we're here, you're like, okay, thank you, I'm here to fight for you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take on all your burdens. They're going to become like my own, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm not going to talk to anybody, but in isolation, I'm going to write a research paper about your problems,
Wow.
and then I'm going to submit these to a scholar who's my adversary and your adversary. And that scholar is going to tell you you're dumb. Going to tell your client's terrible. Yeah, and say you're bad at this, and you're going to experience that person, routinely as engaging in bad faith and oftentimes lying to you.
Hmm.
And so you just don't trust people. And then when you can't resolve things there, you just go to the government. You say, "Hey, government, why don't you decide who's more correct here?" And so if you do
Wow.
that over and over again, year after year, you just become more and more disconnected. And so what I started Troutman, and then what became Troutman Martin Law, out of the deep need to say, I need to somehow connect with who I am. I need to connect with God. I need to connect with my faith,
Hmm.
because the Bible tells me I'm supposed to love my enemies.
Right.
I'm supposed to pray for those that despitefully use me. And then the law says, "Oh no, you're here to fight the people that there's no ethical obligation for a lawyer to love the other side."
Right. I'm sure. Yeah.
And the expectation, your job is to fight. You want to make sure. Sometimes you can find a win-win.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to make sure the other side loses, and that's your job. And so I've been on a journey, particularly of these last 11 years, to say how can I be faithful? Like either our calling to be Christians makes sense as a lawyer, or it doesn't make sense anywhere.
Gotcha.
Uh, and so that's been, not an easy journey, but just one full of a lot of joy, and has given me power and encouragement. And even for lawyers and paralegals and folks that are not Christians,
Yeah.
I feel like I have something to share with them of, this is this is a place where I've gotten water. This is a place when I've been thirsty, when I've been angry, I've been scared,
Yeah.
I feel broken. This is how I can show up, love my enemies, fight for my clients, and it's a joy to be able to do that with other folks.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot, man. I didn't know that. That it was that involved. That it was, I mean, like like it's kind of said the paradox there. Now, can you think of a specific biblical principle that maybe you struggle to apply?
Mm,
You mentioned loving your enemies. That's I think that's tough for anybody. But can you think of a specific
yeah,
one? Yeah.
I mean, I can think of so many.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Lay them on me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, right away, what comes to mind, just like you mentioned, to see the people that you're opposed to,
Yeah.
and um and in the law you are structurally opposed to them.
Okay.
If you as a lawyer approach the other side and you say, oh, I'm just like, I I'm going to put their needs first, because that's
Yeah.
that's like the Christian thing to do. You should probably be disbarred or not practice law,
Right. It's not for
because
you. Yeah.
it's not for you, because your job is you pick a team, or that team picks you, and
Yeah.
you represent those folks. You say, I wake up every day and say, how do I win for them? How do I get the best result through them? And
Okay.
somehow you have to be able to do that, excel in that calling, and then look at the other people. And they may be reason. Sometimes you have great, reasonable opposing counsels. It's a
Yeah.
very collaborative process. You make points, you make observations. Everybody acts in good faith. It's wonderful. Sometimes it's not like that.
Yeah. Would you say most times it's not that way?
I would say most times it's not like that.
Okay.
Or there's it's sort of like any tense struggle.
Okay.
You may have moments where it's like that, but then at any point you say, well, you don't know if that person is saying one thing but is maybe not honest, is acting in bad faith, where their client might change their position, and all of a sudden they just have new directives from their boss, from their client, to behave in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd say, yeah, more often than not. I mean, the law is often a combat sport,
Okay.
um, or it's what we do. I tell folks, it's what we do so we avoid the Hatfield and McCoy situation. It's what we
Oh,
do
sure.
so we avoid war. So it's like, oh no, that's my land, and somebody else says, well, no, that's my land.
Yeah.
And there was a time where we said, well, we can settle this the old-fashioned way. Well, we don't settle it the old-fashioned way for the
Right.
most part in
Yeah.
America, but this is the thing that we do instead of shooting each other.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it brings the energy, and can bring the energy of when in another time or in another context, even in this time, people would use violence.
Sure.
So it is, so there is violence in the practice of law. And so to get to the point of where we fall short, um, I certainly have fallen short when it's easy to forget the humanity of the other side.
Okay.
And so part of the values of our firm is to remember that when that person on the other side, or you deal with clients that have been really victimized,
Yeah.
really treated terribly, either by the government,
Hmm.
either by their spouse or ex-spouse, by a business partner. And it's easy to hate, but you can say, well, I don't hate anybody. You
Yeah.
cannot hate somebody, but you can still begin to cultivate bitterness. Um, and as a lawyer, there's a financial incentive there too. So
Sure.
if your client's hurt and angry, and then you feed on that hurt and anger, and they say, well, yeah, isn't it ridiculous that they do that? And then now you have a billable hour opportunity that's
Gotcha.
also in line with. So it really takes integrity, and integrity in that sense that you're a whole person, and by
Yeah.
being a whole person that's present and healthy for your client, you add so much value in that fight, to be able to absorb their passion, their hurt, their trauma, recognize the wrongness, wickedness,
Okay.
or sometimes rightness of the other. Because your clients are not perfect.
Yeah.
Sometimes your client makes a mistake, and
Sure.
hold that, and just remember that person on the other side, a child of God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I had no idea that that much was behind the scenes. I mean, you mentioned, the high probability of mental health issues. Interestingly enough, I didn't know pastors were either.
Yeah.
So how did you discover do you feel like this is still your passion? I mean, and how did you discover what you were supposed to do? I mean,
Well, that's a great question. I think I'm still discovering what I'm supposed to do,
okay.
and I'm really grateful that so many of my days I get to spend now encouraging other lawyers and
Oh,
connecting
okay.
with them. So today I'm in our Mankato office, and
Oh,
connecting with lawyers about their goals, and here,
nice.
and it's just like it's. So I feel like absolutely I'm engaged in what I'm supposed to be doing, when I can hear the hearts of incredible professionals, and and just encourage them. That's amazing. But to answer your question, well, how did I find out what's working and what's not working?
Yeah.
One, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah.
If every time you
Point.
do the thing that you're given money for, it kills your soul,
Yeah.
then that's telling you something.
Right.
Um, but there's something that my father told me. It's just been a rock in my life. And he said, Simon, you need to know the difference between condemnation and conviction.
Okay. Interesting.
And and condemnation is a lie from the pit of hell, and conviction is the voice of the Holy Spirit in your life.
Okay.
And so this is how he describes it. I describe it this way. It's been incredibly helpful. The
Yeah.
condemnation is very vague,
Okay.
and it'll be something like you're terrible,
Okay.
you're dumb, you're worthless. These are things that are not true. They're
Right.
lies. They will destroy you. They're very vague. Um, a conviction is something that's very specific.
Okay.
It's very concrete. It is, I need to take action here. I can't do this anymore. I can't live my life the way I've been living my life.
Okay.
I so condemnation is you're a lousy drunk. Conviction is I can't live my life drinking like this anymore.
Okay.
And so as you and as me when I feel depressed, I feel disconnected from myself.
Yeah.
I There are all those voices that just say I'm not the kind of person that can do this.
Gotcha.
I can't do, and so that is a voice that you have to begin to recognize. You're like, that's not a helpful voice. That's not the voice of the Holy Spirit. That's not a voice I need to listen to. But when you hear that voice that starts as an action that you can take,
Yeah.
um, I need to do this right now. I need to not do this right now. To the extent you listen to that more and more, your voice just gets attuned to your own convictions.
Yeah.
And so that has absolutely transformed my life to be somebody that acts with conviction,
Yeah.
because you make a habit of hearing conviction. Um, and that's something that you always have to keep sharp, right? So just
Yeah.
because you did that once doesn't mean you don't have to start that active listening the next day. But you can build habits, and you have to build habits
Yeah.
uh, to listen to a voice of conviction. And that's been, thanks, Dad. That's been great.
Yes, yeah, I feel the same way. I've got a lot of things to thank my dad. So tell me about, it seems that being an attorney is very, I mean, like you said, you're representing your client, and seems like it, maybe can be kind of combative. It's you're out there
Yeah.
war slaying dragons. I mean, how do you engage with community, and what has community? How has community helped you, or has it helped you
Mm,
become the person that you are today?
that's a great question. Well, community, I think it means different things in different contexts. But
Sure.
for me, where you put your body matters.
Yeah.
And I love reading Ta-Nehisi Coates,
Okay.
and when he talks about the experience of, particularly black bodies, but where your body and what your body is and how that matters and how that transforms your experience.
Okay.
And so making concrete decisions about where you choose to place yourself in community really matters. And so um as a lawyer, to not just read books and legal treatises about the law,
Yeah.
but to have the privilege to be part of Latino communities and Somali communities and Black communities, and understand and learn from um, and learn from the lived experience of people that you're with, not
Yeah.
just psychically, but in community. Absolutely transformative to my life, transformative to the practice of law. I'm really privileged to practice law from a faith perspective
Yeah.
with people who share either my Christian faith or who share my values. And I can be transparent as a Christian, and even if we don't share a Christian faith, we can explore the values that we have in common with Muslim friends and colleagues and clients, and secular friends and colleagues and clients, to say, the Bible says, against such things there is no law.
Hmm.
And when he's talking about the fruits of the Spirit, when he talks
Yeah.
about peace, love, patience, when you find people of peace and love and patience, that's your community.
Yes.
When you find broken folks, they're also made in the image of God, and that they are also your community.
Yeah.
And so church has been a huge part of my life, even when I've been in different parts of my faith journey. When um, as a lawyer, I grew up Pentecostal.
Oh,
Grateful to
okay.
be Pentecostal.
Yeah.
But Pentecostals are very, for folks that don't know, it's a very experiential faith, right? So,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
talking about your body and what this is faith that you express with your body, you express
Right.
with your voice, you
Right.
express with I'm going to take a risk and words are going to come out of my mouth
Yeah.
that I feel uncomfortable with. So that's been a grounding experience. When you become a lawyer, you're praised and you're celebrated for your skepticism.
Ah,
Um, when
okay.
I take that skepticism back to my faith community, I'm like, oh, I learned all these great things about being skeptical and being critical, and I've brought these back to the church. Don't you find these itchy? Of course, those gifts are not necessarily received
Yes, that's
well.
funny.
So I
Yeah.
felt a lot of dislocation, as a young lawyer, saying, well, how can I be faithful? And how can when when I'm critical, I come to different conclusions than my faith community.
Yeah.
And God's been faithful, God's been gracious, and working with entrepreneurs has been really restorative to my life. Because when I had little or no faith, I saw entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs saw what wasn't there as
Yeah.
if it was,
Right.
and they just worked towards this thing that nobody but them saw. And then
Right.
as they were working, this thing kind of manifested around them. And then after some time, people were like, "Oh, look at that amazing thing that's there." But it was born out of vision. It was born
Yeah.
out of faith, and I found in that entrepreneurial spirit, not just the entrepreneurial ideation, because there are lots of folks that talk about ideas.
Yeah, sure.
True entrepreneurs are not just idea people;
Right.
they're idea doers.
Right.
And your
That's a great
ability
way.
to ideate and then do, really distinguishes you between a dreamer and an entrepreneur. And your ability to ideate, do, and then be faithful in the continuation of that doing,
Yeah.
um, through what almost every entrepreneur I know is multiple setbacks and hardship and failure.
Yeah.
That faith that sustains your doing, that's a successful entrepreneur. And
Yeah.
so by bringing those people into my life, my faith was really restored by just seeing that model of vision, doing, faithfulness. And I thought, well, even if my theology, I can have differences, but I can have faith.
Yeah.
I can do, and then by God's grace, I can be faithful to continue to do what I see.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
love that. I love that because I never really I love that definition for entrepreneurs. And it immediately makes me think of Jesus's teaching when I believe it was a Sermon on the Mount, when he said he compared a stupid carpenter with the smart carpenter, and he said the smart carpenter is the person that takes the word of God and applies it to their everyday
mm,
life.
yeah,
And of course, then the stupid carpenter just goes to Bible study just to be there. I mean, it's like,
builds it on
maybe.
the sand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you would never. But that's exactly like an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur
Yes.
could just one guy, again, like you said, a girl just has an idea. Hey, here, hey, how about this? How about we make
Mm,
whatever? How we do, so they maybe are talking about ideas. Maybe they like the term
yeah.
entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. 'Cause some of those are a
Yeah.
little bit kind of popular, but not everyone is willing to not only come up with the idea, but to take action on it and then keep going. That's the tough part. I was talking to a
Yeah.
guy the other day, who's he's a distance runner, and we were talking about how that um with marathons,
Mm.
most people hang it up at the 20 mile mark.
Wow.
So you think, are you kidding me? I
You've
put
already
in
put
all this
20
time and
miles.
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got just 6 more. But the point is, even though it's just a little bit more,
Mm,
it, they don't stick with it,
yeah.
because it's hard, it's difficult, and but that's how life is, you know what I mean? And so it's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, being an entrepreneur, I love that example. In fact, I used to think entrepreneurs is a person who sees the sun kind of at the top of the horizon there, and so you climb the mountain, you think, oh, I'm going to climb the mountain and grab the sun. You climb up there only to find out it's over the next horizon. So
Yeah.
the danger is that you can just keep climbing and climbing. But, again, you have to have a plan. That's why you have to have community. All of these different things, I think, play a part in helping you be successful. So, yeah, anyway,
Well, it's so good, and I love that, and it just helps, I think, to when you understand what your calling is,
right.
where if you're like if your goal is I need to touch the sun, you're always disappointed, and then
Yes.
at some point, if you can get in the guts of your identity, well, what do I
Right.
do? Oh, I'm a climber. And every day
Right.
I'm climbing to the sun, and then you are winning because you're climbing towards the sun, not you're winning because you're touching the sun. And of course, in that
Right.
metaphor, were you to succeed, you would be consumed,
Yeah.
so many miles before you even got millions of miles before you, or maybe hundreds of thousands of miles before you got to the sun. So
Exactly. Just
that's
just just running
yeah,
crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, man, we've been all over the board. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I'm totally off script, but man, this has been great. So before I let you go, I want to ask one question, one final question.
yeah.
We've talked about a few different scriptures. You mentioned bits and pieces, a few different verses. What would you say is like that one or two or maybe three Bible promises that really
Mm,
have been instrumental in helping you to become the man that you are today?
mm. Again, so what, one or two?
Or more. I mean, I
Yeah,
have
so
tons of
I
them. Yeah.
so I think that First John 4:7, he says, "Beloved, let us love one another.
Mm.
Love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God."
Yeah.
And if you don't love, you don't know God,
Yes.
because God is love.
Yeah.
That has um, that's been an anchor. The whole book of Galatians,
Hmm.
um, reading it not as a book but as a letter,
Yeah.
I think it's Paul at his angriest.
Okay.
That's his, I think you might call it his like angry Twitter era. A lot of his missives kind
Okay.
of read like tweets because and I um that book was transformed for me when I spent a number of years in China,
Hmm.
and I sat with young Chinese Christians
Okay.
who struggled mightily with their identity.
Okay.
And they would say a phrase with, well, I've had this transformative faith experience. They would say transformative, they're like, I'm in, like I'm Christian, like this really, I'm so glad to follow Jesus. But I have this feeling like I'm being a bad Chinese.
Hmm.
I'm being like, somehow I've lost my cultural, or I'm like, there's this tension, and then so many, to the extent that they would connect with Christians from the West, they would confirm that because
Hmm.
rather than sharing their faith, they they were sharing their cultural identity. They were sharing,
Gotcha.
they were putting on their own Western values. They were putting on their own, ideas of what it was to be American or British, or and when I read the book of Galatians and I saw Paul, you know, who had an ethnic identity,
Yeah.
but then shared his faith tradition. He shared his faith with people outside
Right.
of his ethnic identity, and he shared something that transcended different identities.
Yeah.
And then to have somebody come back and say, "Well, no, you actually have to conform to all of our religious laws, all of our ethnic traditions." That Paul had no time for that,
Right.
and he didn't lose the humanity of the other side, but he fought against other Christians,
Yeah.
saying, you're not going to do that. You're not going to put all these extra laws, all these extra burdens on people. And he said, well, who bewitched you? Who cast a spell on you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just the love that he had for people that he was fighting and protecting,
Yeah.
and then the passion that he had to even tell hard truths in his own community, has been an anchor in my life.
Yeah. Do you think he could have made a good attorney?
Yeah, well, I mean, he studied under Gamaliel. He studied under an incredible Greek and Jewish scholar. So he
Okay.
had he had the we and the law were taught through the Socratic method.
Oh, okay.
Paul Paul was also taught through the Socratic method. So he had a similar teach, and as as a Jewish scholar, of course, he was steeped in the Jewish Talmudic traditions
Yeah.
of that time, and so incredible scholar, incredible Socratic thinker. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's great, man. Oh man, this has been a super, super interesting conversation, man.
Well, thank you.
I didn't know that about attorneys. And it's interesting. Uh, again, the pastors are on the list of high probability of mental health issues. And
Absolutely.
from a personal level, I remember I mean, growing up, both my parents were pastors, and being
Mm,
offering up the opportunity to get therapy. Therapy was
yeah.
never a question. Most of the time, it was like, well, if, if you're having some kind of issues because you missed service Wednesday night, or you should have been at church, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And but I remember having conversations with my parents and saying, hey, we had some family issues that we need to deal with, and everybody. I mean, family relationships are complicated, right? I mean, they just are. But anyway, but I remember saying, hey, we need to get a therapist, and it was said like, hey, you know what? I am a therapist. I don't need to get a therapist. It's like, wow.
Oh
So
no.
so it's
Oh no.
interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, hindsight is always 2020. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you see there's certain areas, there's certain professions that naturally lend themselves to
Absolutely.
needing mental help. Help with that.
Lawyers say that too. Oh, wait, I don't need a lawyer. I'm a
You know
lawyer.
what?
And that's like,
Yeah.
that very rarely ends up well.
But that's, anyway, we all have
Yeah.
issues. Lord knows I have mine. And I just
Yeah.
enjoy talking to guys like you so I can it's just good to gain different perspective. And I love what you had to say about the book of Galatians. I mean, all of Paul's books, man, I love, and I especially love all of the sayings that he gave, all the advice he gave to Timothy.
Mm,
And I have a list of all of the different things he told him. Guard the word, practice these things, train in
mm,
godliness. All of
mm.
it had to do with work. I mean, it was all, so anyway, kind of
Yeah.
we've that's been sort of intertwined in our conversation that, you need to work, you need to figure out who you are, but that just takes challenge, it takes work and time and energy, and also great communities. All those things work together. So anyway,
Well,
before we wrap up, go ahead. You're gonna say something? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I wanted to just affirm you and thank you for your faithfulness in your entrepreneurship journey that just encourages me. And I'm so glad you have this platform to kind of share this with other folks.
Thank you.
That for folks that have been in the journey for longer, we have to look back
Yeah.
because when there are setbacks,
Oh man.
if you're younger and you're like, oh no, I failed or that didn't work out. I guess I'm not an entrepreneur. I guess I'm not. And instead of affirming that identity to say like, this
Yeah.
is just, this is part of your journey.
It's part of the
That
journey.
doesn't have to define your journey.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for just like creating these platforms and not just like
Yeah.
you can learn those things on your own, but you're just putting that information out, that experience out for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate you saying that. And it's interesting what you said about the I guess how people define being an entrepreneur. I used to think so when I would talk about my experience as an entrepreneur, which has been most of my career, I would often talk about how many times I was shot out of the sky. That was a term. I don't know where I
Mm,
picked that up, but yeah, I've
mm,
shot out of the sky so many times, fell down so many times. And I started to define myself by that, by the
mm.
falls.
Wow.
But then I realized that being successful in anything, it's
Mm,
not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up again.
yeah.
And that's really, and that's what you do as an entrepreneur. And that's what you were talking about. I mean, so you have an idea, get shot down. It's like, okay, it didn't work. All right, no problem. We do another one, or let me tweak it. Let me, and it takes courage. It takes courage to be a successful entrepreneur. And I think it also takes courage to be a successful father, to be a
Yes.
successful, husband.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just
Well,
interesting how
can
that,
I
yeah, go ahead, please
I
do.
was just gonna say, well, just so that there's another part of this happy, healthy attorney story
Okay.
that's really that's really critical because I had this cathartic moment and it wasn't quite like Jerry Maguire leaving the talent agency, but I had great clarity and great urgency.
Yeah.
I had that conviction I know what I need to do.
Yeah.
I'm starting my own firm. But after, 3 or 4 years, I had hired one or two people.
Yeah.
But I was burnt out. I was
Hmm.
I was here. I thought I had this own business. I had done it, and I was ready to leave the practice of law.
Hmm.
And I remember just coming home because people were so cruel to each other. And
Wow.
and I just remember just wanting to do nothing but watch The Walking Dead, because I just felt so much empathy with everybody in
Wow.
that show, and just saying, just to touch people, I was like, people are so cruel to each other. I
Yeah.
just can't even. I just can't. I just need to wall myself off from people. And it was February, and there's one of those moments of conviction. I
Okay.
just felt in my heart, I need to leave the practice of law by the end of the month.
Wow.
I just because this is not this is no longer healthy. This is no longer working for me. And so I was ready to do that. I shared that with my wife,
Hmm.
incredible woman that just is she knew me.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, that sounds right.
Hmm.
I don't know what we're gonna, but that just affirmed me in my identity and affirmed me in my conviction,
Yeah. Yeah.
in that really critical moment. So we didn't know what the next day was, but we said, no, we're going to operate out of our conviction, not
Hmm.
out of any sense of condemnation. And so rather than crisis, that brought clarity.
Yeah. Nice.
And within 48 hours, I had met a law school classmate of mine, Graham Martin,
Hmm.
and he had been on a journey of sobriety. He had been
Okay.
sober about 4 or 5 years and was in transition, but as a lawyer had all the skill sets that I needed
Ah.
to hire in my practice.
Okay.
So I told him, it's one of those, do I disclose who I am? How weird is this going to be?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be transparent. Hey, I'm, I'm Pentecostal. You can call it whatever you want, a deep intuition, we
Yeah.
call it, I heard from the Lord, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I have this conviction. I'm going to be out of the practice of law by the end of the month. So I could sell you this practice. I could probably give you this practice. But I'm out.
Hmm.
And after talking, he basically said, "Hey, I'm not ready to buy or take over your practice. How about I just come in and work for you?"
Ah. Okay.
And he took over my practice. And over the next couple of months, I healed. Over the
Wow.
next couple of months, I ran for office and won in a special election. Over the
Wow.
next couple of months, there was a season of conviction. It was 2017. Um, Donald Trump had just been elected. It was the Muslim ban. I had a lot of Muslim friends and
Hmm.
clients, and I felt a deep conviction to go to Somalia.
Yeah.
And so I did, and we had that
Wow.
opportunity to, within the week, be on the ground with new friends, new neighbors, existing friends in Somalia, build those bridges. And so at the end of that 90-day, 120-day period of deep conviction and action,
Yeah.
I turned around. I had essentially left the practice of law. I had healed in my heart. I was
Yeah.
now elected, and I had a new constellation of relationships in a community that I cared about a lot. And so that, without that brokenness, without that conviction, without that opportunity to partner with somebody that, you and I would call this a divine appointment, right?
Sure.
We say that was a divine appointment,
Sure.
and so his journey of sobriety, he said, I have to be happy and healthy, Simon. If I'm
Yeah.
not happy and healthy, it's not. So now he's been sober, I think, 11 years.
Wow.
And so as we built this firm, I can tell my story, but I couldn't tell it without also telling that side of the story.
Oh, sure.
That,
No.
oh, that this is how we do it together. It wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have first been transparent, then been honest, and then heard the voice of conviction, and then taken action to say, well, now we're going to see where this goes.
Yeah, and I think even a step further, though, you had a challenge, and this is what I when I think of Joseph, you had a challenge that was you had an opportunity or an opportunity that was disguised as a challenge, is my point.
Yeah.
Training that was disguised
Yeah.
as a challenge. But so you saw that as an
Mm,
opportunity, and
yes.
it feels like you leaned into it, and you went to, which to me, my coach, my life coach is my wife. In fact, it's
Mm,
interesting. Oftentimes, the voice of the Lord sounds amazingly like my wife's voice.
Yes, yes, it
And
does.
but my point is, you had that situation, you leaned into it, talked to your coach, and you
Yeah.
explored the opportunity. So then, you met with your person, and you saw how that, connected. But and I think that there's so many of those opportunities out
Mm,
there that
mm,
people they miss because they're like, oh, this is hard. I'm done, or whatever.
yeah.
As opposed to realizing something that my wife and I have learned to say, in part of our belief system is everything happens for us and not
Mm,
to us.
mm,
So
mm,
when things come up, even though it might seem crazy, it might seem hard, it might seem negative potentially, I always have to stop and think, okay, wait a minute. Okay, this is for me. So okay, I'm not going to
mm.
panic, so
It's good.
what am I learning? And but it's taking practice. That's not something that happened overnight, you know what I mean? But
Yes.
my point is that that's what you experience, and that's what I think a lot of people, if they look at those situations as opportunities,
Yes.
and then take advantage of them, trying to walk them out, because you may not know all the answers, but it's like, okay, just one step. Remember this book that my wife introduced me to called Just Enough Light for the Step That I'm On.
Mm,
So the
yeah.
idea, you don't have all
Yep.
the answers for 3 years down the line,
Yep.
5 years. Just okay, just today. All right. So what I need to do differently? Okay, Lord. All right, great.
Yep.
And so it's interesting. So yeah, those things, when you look back on all those different decisions, it's kind of like another way that I in my own mind put it together is like Google Maps. Like the plan of God is like Google Maps. So in other
Mm,
words, you have a
mm,
destination. You may not know how to get there, or you're like, okay, I think I'm gonna turn left. And it doesn't even matter if you go the wrong way, because God's going to recalibrate the directions from where you are. So it's
yeah.
like, because you're gonna end up getting, as long as you keep moving and you're open, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
then you'll get recalibrated. So anyway, so a
This is
lot of
good. This is
different
so
ways of saying what you
it's
said. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
good.
Yeah.
No, I was just only amening over here.
Oh, yes.
And I was and so and maybe the other side of that story too is, and by the end of that summer, so but and towards the end of the year, it
Yeah.
was one of those situations where, well, there was enough. The firm had been prosperous enough that we both were prosperous
Wow.
at the end of the year.
That's
and
crazy.
and so Walter Brueggemann, is a theologian. He talks about the idea of Sabbath as resistance,
Hmm.
and the idea that when you rest, and this is to all the entrepreneurs out there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
to all the pastors are listening to this.
Yeah.
Pastors a lot of times are entrepreneurs that
Yeah.
don't own anything, but they're
Right.
building an organization.
Right.
They don't ultimately, but this idea that you rest, he said, this is actually radical resistance, because when you're saying to the powers that be, I'm withholding my labor,
Hmm.
which is powerful. But
Yeah.
also he said it's a radical act of faith to say that as I'm withholding my labor, there will be enough.
Wow.
And it's different and so in that season of saying, like, I need to stop,
Yeah.
it was it was like a Sabbath. It was like a way to
Hmm.
rest. And at the end of that season, as I began to engage in the practice of law again, oh, well, what in that space of rest, I became elected.
Wow.
Like, all these other things happened, all these other opportunities happened, and they couldn't have happened but for rest. So
Yeah,
for
yeah.
entrepreneurs out there that find a setback or find they need to let go of a project, or they need to, also there's pastors and entrepreneurs. A lot of times we need to be needed.
Yeah,
Like, I
right.
am the center of everything, and it couldn't, if I weren't doing X, Y, or Z, this couldn't possibly happen.
Right, right, right.
When now one of the lessons I seem to continually need to learn, is that I'm usually more fruitful the less I do.
So that's funny.
And instead of saying, well, if I can't do it, nobody else can, or if I can do it better, nobody else should do it, or I'd never ask anybody to do what I can do.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of saying, could somebody else on our team possibly do what I'm doing? And to the extent that I then change my focus to say, you can, and I tell myself there'll be enough. There's so many more times I can. There's more than enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's powerful, man. But it's interesting, just your perspective on things. You know what I mean? One little tweak, it can, change the whole program. I mean, change your life, really. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
well, I'm gonna cut it off there, man, because we
Thank
could
you.
go for another 3 hours. We could just and I'm gonna
Thank
resist the
you.
urge to do that. Yeah, it's been great. I thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And we need to do this again. We need to
It's a
But
joy anytime.
yeah. Okay, man. Well, I'm gonna hold you to that. Hold you to
Thank
that.
you.
So, all right. Well, thanks again, man. And I guess we'll
Blessings.
talk again here soon. All right.
Sounds good. We'll see you.
Okay. Bye now. Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Hey, thanks again for tuning in today. And until next time, stay aligned with God's promises and empowered by His word. We'll see you next time.